Hello, today I'm going to be giving a presentation over emerging adulthood. What is emerging adulthood? Emerging adulthood is a fairly new stage of life which is identified by psychologist Jeffrey Arnett. It happens between the ages of 18 and 25, and this is a really hard, weird in between time where you're technically an adult, but you're not quite settled into the adult life and you're still getting accustomed to things. Unlike past generations, young people today are waiting longer to get married, have kids, or commit to a full time career. That's why this stage exists mostly in developed countries, where people have more time and freedom to explore. It's a time of possibilities, self discovery, and figuring out what direction you want to take in your life. A lot of people change their mind throughout these stages, and that's fine. It is misleading that you're supposed to have everything figured out. Physically, emerging adulthood is the best that your body will ever be. People in their early 20s are at their peak in terms of strength, speed, endurance, and reaction time. That's why most Olympic athletes are usually between ages 18 and 29. Um, your muscle strength and bone density is just all around better through these stages of life. It's at its best. But here is the ironic part. Through these stages of life, you're at your peak health physically, but the risks are actually higher. Risk taking is higher because due to like substance to abuse and risky behaviors such as drinking and driving and stuff like that. And not because of anything physically, but because of choices that people make during this stage of life. Social shifts that redefine young adulthood. Emerging adulthood actually recently exists, and it didn't exist a few generations ago because of major social changes. The sexual revolution in the 1960s gave people more freedom around sex and relationships, and the movement opened up education and career opportunities so women didn't have to rush into marriages to rely on anybody. And the youth movement made it cool to stay young and put off adult responsibilities. So, together, all these movements together reshaped how people think about adulthood and have stopped making people feel like they need to rush into things and making space for an in between period where you can focus on yourself and try different paths and just take your time figuring life out. According to Arnett, there are five core features that define emerging adulthood. The first one is be identity exploration, which is identifying and exploring your love, work, and beliefs. And this is where people are figuring out who they are. And the second would be instability. There are a lot of life changes and transitions during this time. And so instability just comes with that. Third is self focus, not in a selfish way, but because people are learning to be independent for the first time, really. And it's kind of like you have to think of yourself. And then finally, possibilities and optimism. This is when people feel the most hopeful about their future. It's basically because there's so much to look forward to, you really don't know what's going to happen. So if you're optimistic about it, um, you could be excited about where things might go. With all of that, emerging adulthood is a time of a lot of change, and change can be very messy at times and uncomfortable. People move a lot, switch majors, they change jobs, start and end relationships. A lot of people move back in and out with parents. But this stage is also about having hope, and many young adults feel like this is their chance to shape their own identity and their future. And so nobody should be ashamed of anything, and just as long as you're being your best. And even people from rough family backgrounds often see this as a time to break away and have a fresh start because they're like on their own. They have like their own self identity and stuff. And it's not always smooth, but life is full of potential. And this time of life is especially full of potential. And that's what makes emerging adulthood such a powerful and transformative formative stage in life. Are cultural differences when defining adulthood. In traditional cultures, the path to adulthood is often defined by one event, which is marriage. It's not just about love, but marriage is seen as the moment when a person takes on the real adult responsibilities and plans for a larger family networking. This marks a shift toward interdependence, mutual obligations between spouses, and extended families. But in developed countries, the stories are very different. Most people today don't see marriage as a major milestone toward adulthood. In fact, it often ranks near the bottom of surveys asking what defines what becomes an adult. So, this shows a cultural shift. While traditional societies value connection and responsibility, modern societies emphasize personal independence and self exploration. Did touch on how the body is in its peak physical stage of life in emerging adulthood, but it also is when people start to notice early signs of aging. Everything looks really healthy and feels healthy, but small changes start to begin. Hair starts to gray or thin. The heart may start to beat slightly less effectively during exercising, and changes in lung capacity and the immune system slowly start. And these changes are subtle, so it's really hard to tell. And a lot of people in emerging adulthood don't really feel them yet, but they do mark the early stages of aging. The body is still running strong, but it is no longer invincible. Starting at age 25, your metabolism begins to slow down, and this is called the basal metabolic rate, or BMR. It's the energy your body uses just to stay alive at rest. A slower BMR means that the same meals and snacks that kept you healthy before now lead to weight gain more easily. That's why many young adults become overweight or even obese during this period because they're not used to these changes. And a major national study has found that obesity more than doubled from adolescence into the late 20s. And so people need to focus on staying healthy and need to be aware of that and always be able to adjust and be smarter, move more, be intentional. And it's not about looks, it's about your long-term health and overall. Exercise isn't just good for your body, it's one of the best investments that you can make for your overall future. Most studies recommend aerobic exercises are for emerging adults like running, swimming, dancing because it raises your heart rate and it helps your body burn fat and not just during the workout but also after the workout. You're still burning that fat from your aerobic exercising. And this also just helps your overall heart health and boost your mood, it reduces stress, it lowers the risk of serious disease. Long term studies show that people who stay active actually live longer and healthier lives. So even if you don't aren't active or think like you can't do it, like any level is good. Like just starting at low levels and then slowly increasing your activity makes a major difference. So if you move your body, your future self will definitely thank you. Although young adults are at their peak health, they are also at peak risk taking. And so they are less likely than teens to take major risks, but they do still struggle since you have that adult freedom now. So you make your own choices, but there's that period of figuring out, you know, oh, my choices have consequences, you just can't do whatever you want. Um, Things like binge drinking, drug use, unprotected sex, they all have serious consequences. And it is just really strange how emerging adults um, slowly figure that out from going from kids to being actual adults. It takes time and it's not all pretty, but as emerging adults mature, they tend to settle down and reduce these behaviors. So, middle adulthood is actually when we start to have graying hair, wrinkles, changes in our body shape, and these changes reflect the natural biological aging process. By this stage, most people's hair does gray or thin, and especially in men, and the skin will lose its elasticity, causing wrinkles. The body begins to lose muscle and gain fat easier. Um, these physical changes seem superficial, but they actually do reflect deeper shifts in the metabolism, hormone levels, and cell regeneration. So it's kind of like this is happening, so you know this is happening on the inside. So um, it's the body's way of signaling that the middle years have arrived. The climacteric refers to the midlife period when fertility declines. For women, this process ends with menopause, the permanent end of ovulation and menstruation, and this typically starts in the late 40s or early 50s. For men, the change is slower and more subtle. Sperm production and testosterone levels gradually start to decrease, and hormonal shifts can affect mood, energy, and relationships. While it is a natural biological process, it can also be emotionally complex as people adjust to changes in identity, family roles, and physical experiences. So it's good to be patient with people who are in this stage of life because you never know how their hormones are making them feel that day, and it's just new for them. So menopause happens to all women, but how it is experienced can look very different across the world. In Western cultures, symptoms like hot flashes, mood swings, and memory lapses are very common. Yet in other places like Japan or Mexico, there are far few women that report hot flashes. Diet, lifestyle, and cultural expectations play a huge role in your symptoms and experience. For instance, soy-based foods contain plant estrogen, which may, they suggest, may help balance hormones. So this reminds us that biology interacts deeply with culture. So the way we eat, move, and even think about aging, I think, can shape how our bodies respond to it. Middle adulthood is challenging. People feel strong and capable, yet their bodies are quietly changing behind the scenes. The risk for heart disease and obesity starts to rise as the metabolism slows and arteries start to stiffen. Lifestyle plays a huge role in what happens next. This is why I have basically been talking a lot about exercise and aerobic exercising because at this stage of life, it is almost essential to have regular exercise, especially aerobic exercising, to keep your body moving and not have it all stiff. And you need to have a balanced nutrition, and this can help control stress and prevent a lot of midlife health issues. So, the choices that are made in these years set up the foundation for healthy aging and making this stage not just a time of decline, but the opportunity of empowerment. And finally, one of the greatest advantages of middle adulthood is the growth of expertise. Deep, specialized knowledge is built up over years of experience. Unlike fluid intelligence, which may slow down with age, expertise is a form of crystallized intelligence that keeps growing. A nurse with 20 years of experience or a teacher who has spent decades in the classroom can recognize patterns, anticipate problems, and make quick, effective decisions that a new person just couldn't make. And this is just the repetition. They've done this, they're not new to this. This ability comes from something called automas- automaticity. Sorry. And that is the process that becomes so familiar that it almost seems effortless. So it's like you're a machine. Expertise helps explain why middle aged adults often hold leadership roles. Their expertise allows them to make smart, confident choices in years of their learning. Thank you.